And so this is like we made a mistake. We got good results by accident. And then we realized if we had gone the right way and read the literature first, we would have never done the experiment. So it was a lucky mistake for us.
Welcome back, everybody. Rich Brubaker, founder of Collective Responsibility, here today with another episode of the Mission Driven Podcast. Through this podcast, I'm speaking with mission-driven entrepreneurs, innovators, investors, academics, the ecosystem of individuals who are looking out their window, seeing a challenge, and using the power of entrepreneurship and innovation to address those challenges. For me, it's all about inspiring and equipping the next generation, or even those within the ecosystem, to better understand how to leverage these tools, bring them to scale, support those who are trying to make the work happen. So with that, I'm extremely excited to have Legena Henry, who is the founder of Rum and Sargassum, based in Barbados, where she, for the last few years, has been working with her team to commercialize an indigenous renewable transportation solution for her area. And it's a really great story. It started in a lab, started with some students, as she is a professor. And great to have you on here to talk about the work that you and your students have been doing.
Great to be here, Richard. Thanks for having us.
Well, as a starting point, we always like to ask, who are you and what is the mission that you're on?
Okay, great. So I'm Dr. Legena Henry, and I'm the CEO and founder of Rum and Sargassum Incorporated. Rum and Sargassum is a spin-off company from the University of the West Indies, Barbados campus. It's called UWE Cave Hill. And we started we actually started in a summer research project funded by the IDB on campus with 5 undergraduate students at UWE Cave Hill. It was really meant to be a desktop study kind of summer, but we had a really diverse team, and one person wanted to do lab experiments. Her name is Brittany McKenzie, and we went in that direction that summer, and sargassum kind of showed up and surprised us. And so
What was the research? What was the original question, or what was the original research that started this journey?
we're in Barbados. This is 2019, and Barbados is on its path to being fossil fuel free by 2030, a very ambitious national goal. At that time, the Prime Minister, newly instated, is Mia Mottley, Prime Minister Mottley, and she's ambitious. She's a climate advocate, right? Famous now. And so she said, I want my country to be fossil fuel free. And what do we need to get there? And so I'm the lecturer for renewable energy at the one, I guess the largest university campus on the island, and the one outpost of the University of the West Indies in Barbados. And so we're kind of seen as the subject matter experts in terms of renewable energy for the Caribbean region. UWE is a regional university. There's 5 campuses throughout the Caribbean, Barbados being one of the major campuses. And so I have a class, I'm teaching a class called Sustainable Energy Systems, and we're talking about the national transition. And one student asked, well, what are we going to do in terms of transport? We're talking a lot about the electric grid, but what is the transportation solution? And my response is, well, you walk around Barbados and you see all these beautiful electric cars everywhere. There's a lot of Nissan Leafs on the island, also a few. By 2019, there was a couple Teslas on the island as well. I said, well, what about the electric car transition that we're seeing in Barbados more than any other Caribbean island right at that moment? And she says, well, I can't afford an electric car. And she's like, yeah, and I don't think I could buy one before 2030. And I thought, oh yeah, me either. Like I didn't buy an electric car when I moved here. So, and we actually did look into it, and we were like, okay, yeah, not for us right now. And so he thought, well, what is the average person gonna do in a transition in Barbados? What does the average person drive? The average person drives a Suzuki Swift, a small gasoline-powered sedan or hatchback. And so we got to work. I pulled some of the 4 of the more dynamic students from that class that semester. Got one other student from who's like transitioning from high school into undergrad, from one of the local high schools, and we sat together in the lab, the renewable energy lab at UWI Cave Hill, and said, what's for us? What's close to this? And we thought the best example right now in this hemisphere is Brazil. They have this massive sugar industry that kind of it moves between sugar and energy on any given day. A factory could be a sugar factory today and a ethanol factory tomorrow, and so based on the markets and the stock and whatever what was best for them that day. And so we were like, okay, well, can Barbados be a little tiny Brazil in the Caribbean Sea? We have sugarcane fields. Sugarcane is a rich part of the history, cultural, economic history of all of the British West Indian islands. And so we looked at sugar for 3 weeks and realized we needed something else. We needed another feedstock. And so,
But did you set this lab up to specifically commercialize things, or was this kind of like a one-off? You're like, oh, hey, actually, we struck gold. Like, what was the background to the lab and how you position this research? Because I feel like most academics would just make this a project and, okay, great summer, great ideas. Let's go back to school and to, to study more. But it sounds like you actually were looking to commercialize something maybe from the start, if I'm wrong. And I'm just curious, like how you did the setup.
I spent my whole life up to that point in classrooms and university campuses and schools, and within the academic world was very strong at academics. Thought of myself as an academic, and so that summer when we found that sargassum could produce the same quality volume of biogas as some of these biogas grasses that they grow around the world. I was solving it like a scientist, and I was seeing it from the perspective of an engineer and scientist. I didn't think of it as a business proposition at all. But at the same time, my university starting to step. We have this principal, Clive Landis, and he's like, we want our universities and all the campus principals around the University of the West Indies are like, can we start being solvers? Can we start commercializing our research? But and this is the spirit of my training, and so there's a resonance between what they're saying and what I've seen in Cambridge for many years. And so I said, well, I kind of seen that, and I kind of believe it can be true. And so we start making these steps towards marketplace. From me, I see myself as this lifelong academic, but suddenly I'm being asked to also look at commercialization. And so it becomes a new academic journey for me. What does it mean to commercialize research?
And then that journey, what did it look like? You mentioned that you started off with kind of sugar and came maybe Brazil, but you end up in sargassum. Like, what was the iteration? What was the ideation process? And how long did that take?
Okay, so the academic process, if it's honest and follows all the rules, the first thing you always do is lit review. You always say, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. What did the giants say or do before I came here? And so we spent the first 3 weeks really in reading and understanding what is the sugarcane industry, what's it been like, what is the trajectory. And we realized, okay, sugarcane has been on a decline for over 7 decades in the whole Caribbean, especially in Barbados. And so, no, we don't have enough sugar to run road traffic and also have a cup of tea. So how do we do this? So we kind of by the third week we're in kind of, oh shucks, wrong avenue kind of mood, disappointed, kind of depressed. And then one of the students on her way home saw big tractors on the beach moving sargassum off the beach, and she came to my office and she's like, why don't we try sargassum seaweed? It's everywhere, there's lots of it. And I thought, okay, well, we were in the mode of giving up on sugar, but we do have some rum wastewater we collected because we visited the rum distilleries who use sugar to make rum. And so we had some wastewater we had collected during the 3 weeks. And I said, why don't you take the rum distillery wastewater we already have, co-digest it with sargassum, and let's see what happens. She was excited and she went off into the lab. We found collaborators over in the biology department, and she got to work setting up small lab desktop biogas experiments using rum distillery wastewater and sargassum seaweed. And we use local manure to you need the methanogens in there too, and so we added manure from the local sheep. And yeah, that was the first set of experiments. But one of the things, if you'll notice, we spent 3 weeks reading about sugarcane. We didn't read about sargassum. And I was like, okay, this is kind of a new problem. And we kind of just lost 3 weeks. So just get to the lab. Because if anything meaningful comes from this summer, you need to start experiments now. So I didn't send her back to the literature necessarily. And only after we got really good results from biogas produced from the sargassum, then we went back into literature and found the literature said sargassum is bad for biogas, so don't even bother. And so this is like a mistake. So this is like we made a mistake. We got good results by accident, and then we realized if we had gone the right way and read the literature first, we would have never done the experiment. So it was a lucky mistake for us. And so, yeah.
Okay, so that's sort of sargasm coming, and forgive me, sargasm is a technical speak for seaweed, if I have it correctly.
Oh, sure. No,
Uh,
well, there's lots and lots of different species of seaweed, but sargassum is one strain of brown sea algae. And we have actually three particular species of sargassum that dominate the floating. So it's a pelagic seaweed. It floats. It doesn't need the to be in the seabed to grow. It actually grows at the surface. So it drifts, grows, it floats in the current and wind and comes from across the Atlantic Ocean to the Caribbean Sea.
that sounds like a logistics nightmare when it comes to being a stable feedstock. So it works out chemically, mechanically, works in a car, but did that, that challenge of the logistics enter and be like, okay, it might make sense in the lab, but it won't make sense in the market.
So my background, like I said, mechanical engineering, 3 degrees, but my PhD actually is on ocean wave mechanics and dynamics. So I wrote I wrote a PhD thesis about the mathematics of how ocean waves work and statistical expectations around the ocean waves. When I see a feedstock that's floating on the water, I don't panic as much as somebody who thinks of biofuel comes from manure and from cows, which is the state of the art in the US, for example. The biofuel industry is around cattle farming and cattle ranches. And so this is a different feedstock with different challenges, but not impossible. We've actually worked with CLS France, who they use satellite images to predict where sargassum is seen from the satellites. A year ago, we helped them to collect data from drones down on the local data and basically ground truthing their satellite readings from local captured data to help make the satellite readings more accurate, but also to help them to estimate the volume of sargassum in the water that's being sensed by the satellite. And so there are ways around the challenges of this floating feedstock, and there is some order in seeming chaos. And so I've had a PhD candidate for 4 semesters on this question of looking at ways to use AI and machine learning with drone data and satellite data to understand the movement of the biomass. And this is an ongoing question in places like the University of Maryland, NOAA in the United States. And then there's other people around the sargassum areas looking at the science of predicting the mass.
If you take like the most optimistic view, then based on your science and the work, what what percentage of the market for biofuels could you get off of just the sargassum alone?
Listen, on a bad day in Barbados, for how much sargassum arrives on the beach, that could power all the energy needs of Barbados for 3 months. Just on one bad day, how much arrives on the beach. And we're saying we don't want it to ever arrive on the beach ever again. It's destructive when it gets to the beach. It destroys coastal habitats. It disrupts turtle nesting, and there's a lot of crisis involved in sargassum rotting on a Caribbean beach. It's a turn off in terms of tourism. It could slow down tourism, And so we're saying, let's just stop it from ever getting to the beach. Let's preempt and predict where it's going to be over the next 5 days. Send out our assets to collect the sargassum that seems to be heading to the beach. Leave the ones that don't get to our beach or Grenada's beach. Leave that in the ocean. But because it actually helps, it's like a floating rainforest. So it's kind of good. It does take carbon out of the atmosphere. But the ones that are heading to the beach, harvest them and put them in a biodigester. And so we don't anticipate that the volume of sargassum, if this biofuel from sargassum solution became like a national strategy for Barbados, we'll never run out of sargassum. The thing we might run out of is wastewater because it's a small population, but not the biofuel feedstock.
So talk to me about the pilot. Like, okay, you've proven this will work in the lab. You've proven that there's some commercial. You proved that there's enough feedstock, if you need to. What was the pilot, and how quickly did you find that people were interested in buying this and supporting this?
So the next thing we did was test drive zero in September 2024, where we drove an electric car that was charged with sargassum seaweed biogas. And so how do we do that? We set up a 2,500 liter biodigester in a local high school. This local high school has energy students who study who specialize in energy, which is at ninth and 10th grade. We call it Form 4 and Form 5 in Barbados. But in the US system, that'll be ninth and 10th grade, where they say, I want to go into renewable energies, phys chem, agriculture, things like that. And so the school was really happy. We actually donated this biodigester to that school on behalf of the current Minister of Energy in Barbados. And so one day my team went over there and set it up. We had the rum distillery come over and deliver 2,500 liters of wastewater. And we manually went to the ocean, collected fresh sargassum, blended it up with and manure, and we set up the digesters. It took about 6 weeks, and then we started having a full digester of biogas. But this is just 2,500 liters, so it's small, and this is not enough to compress it to put it in a gasoline car. And my principal of my campus at that time is like, when are we going to have test drive zero? We keep talking about it. We need to hurry up and drive a car on sargassum. So I was like, okay. At that time, the Russia-Ukraine stuff was unfolding. And one of the images that started coming into my newsfeed is people in the Ukraine charging their electric car with like a portable generator. Yeah. So I was like, oh, shoot, we could try that. And so we just walked into the hardware and picked up a portable generator, a dual fuel, so the one that could actually run on propane and gasoline. We put propane, sorry, we took the sargassum biogas, upgraded it, so took out all the I guess contaminants. So basically you have to take out water, H2O, you have to take out H2S, hydrogen sulfide, and you have to take out CO2. That's the main thing. And so we made a filter with just 3 water filters, and we ran the biogas through them with cat litter, bleach, and activated carbon. That methane, we pumped it at a high pressure into a propane tank, just using a fridge, a compressor from a refrigerator. And so at this high pressure in this propane tank, we could basically run the generator. So this portable generator is running, and we plug in the electric car and it's charged. So that's how we drove an electric car on sargassum seaweed. And that was...
Okay, now you're a few years after the pilot. Where are you now? Do you have your station, and are you plugging this into, just general cars now? Where are you, and where do you see yourself going forward the next few years?
So over this time, and it started in 2019, it's been a journey of understanding what does commercialization mean, how do you march to the marketplace, how do you scale up, what are the different TRL levels. So on Test Drive Zero, we are at TRL 5, which is a real world scale application of our solution. When we looked at the kinds of support beyond Test Drive Zero, we put some resources into completing our pilot biogas station. And I would say the pilot biogas station is probably 85% complete now. And the point of that is we've been speaking with people at Get Invest towards EU funding, and what they've said is over and over again, successful biogas plants funded have always had a working pilot that funders could come and walk around in the pilot, and you say, okay, now you see it works. Picture it 3,000 times the size of this. It'll still work. And so we're on our path to completing our pilot, which is in St. John in Barbados. The other thing we're doing is this. So we've built a financial model for 8 megawatt plant in Barbados, a 2 megawatt plant in Grenada. But we also knew a good way to build this business and a possible stream of business is also bootstrapping, like getting our own revenue stream and bootstrapping the solution. And so we are working on a CNG bridge, which is cars that could run on CNG, compressed natural gas, can drive on biogas, upgraded biogas. So I come from Trinidad, which is the island next to Barbados, and Trinidad is oil rich, and they have 20,000 CNG cars driving around Trinidad, sedans, a regular sedan. You put a CNG kit, it takes 4 hours to install a CNG kit. So this is not a long, arduous process. The kit itself is worth like $300. The labor cost. Between labor and the kit, it costs around $2,000 to have your gas car become a dual fuel car. And it's been done over and over in Trinidad. We are bringing that market to Barbados. And so our hope is to have a few hundred cars driving on natural gas, which is Barbados imports natural gas daily to run the operations of the island. And so we're going to just buy some of that from the Barbados National Energy Company Limited and sell to customers. That gives us a revenue stream to then build biogas in a modular manner.
What's the size of the market we're talking about here? Because I'm always curious about scale, right? And so it's like it's a large ocean nation, I think is what you called it. You know, so large. So it's like how many people? What's the economics like if this works? And then what does scale mean for you? Because do you have to be like the next big oil major, or are you just happy to create something that works for your region, for other, island states where, they have maybe some resource constraints, or they want to go to net zero, or they want to deal with their waste in a circular way? Like, how do you look at scale and what are the economics around that?
Barbados is an island of a population of about 300,000. And there are 150,000 gasoline cars driving around in Barbados. And so they have a high number of cars per capita, fairly. Yeah, lots of people drive. There's lots of road traffic. But we're talking about this, like the profit margins from selling natural gas to even taxis or some of the high volume fleets in Barbados, high mileage fleets. It could be the profit margin is large enough that you could build biogas plants 250 kilowatts at a time. This solution is scalable in that any locality you go to where there's a proper source of industrial wastewater and an arrival of sargassum seaweed, it could be implemented there. You obviously have to set up your labs and understand how the feedstock behaves wherever you go, because the feedstock responds to the ocean around it. And so there's way more heavy metals in the sargassum you might pick up in Trinidad, because Trinidad is near the South American continent, versus Barbados is 200 kilometers off the Caribbean Sea, very far from any continental river sources. So the chemistry around Barbados, the marine water chemistry, is very different, and there's low heavy metals. So the industrial process in Barbados around this solution will be very different from that of Trinidad or another island nearer to, yeah. So it is scalable in different locations with some careful study. It could be implemented anywhere where sargassum is a crisis.
What is it like being an academic who's commercializing? And how has this kind of been either like this this moment for your students of like, excitement and pride and that they're working on this. Like, how do you see this as a professor overseeing, this group of students?
I guess when I set out to go into a space of academia, I knew I wanted it to have an impact on the people around, on the students, on the campus, the community, the academic community. And it has been that. I think people, all the students, in fact, even before we got invited to the UN talk, just the way our summer went, 2019, before it became anything, my students wrote me this beautiful thank you card. So the students were just blown away just by that. And they felt like now I know the work I do matters. And that was my experience even on the campus because I worked in the Trinidad campus before the Barbados campus, and I saw students go from the dean's warning list to the dean's honor list in after one summer.
But how do you, like, if you're working with students over the summer, I have to imagine like a normal project you structure very differently. Like, hey, we're about to commercialize this. Hey, we've raised 700,000. Like, how do you interact with the students differently? How do you focus them? And then how do you make sure like that they're getting the most out of that time for themselves to take forward in their future career? Or is it that you're really self-selective and so they're energy students, so they want to work on this, and now the word's out that they can work with you on this?
Soon after, I mean, 2019 was my first year on UE Cave Hill campus. Soon after that, I started looking towards commercialization of the research. And so we actually stopped taking new students and just worked with the ones that we had there. Right now, I'm actually transitioning away from the University of the West Indies towards full-time Rum and Sargassum. And so I'm one of the academics who said, I want to see this to the end, and I'm actually gonna come off the path of like the main academic path and come onto a mainly commercialization path. And so I think I'm the first in my university to do that. I went to an IP seminar we had, and they were presenting about the process of commercializing research, and I was invited. I kind of didn't know what the seminar was about, but I was the last speaker. And when I stood up and said, "Well, we actually have our university gave us," they signed basically they signed over the IP to Rum and Sargassum to commercialize it. There was kind of like a hush, and like everybody in the room was just surprised at how far we've gotten. But literally, I it's really hard to commercialize research in our university system because everybody teaches 3 courses a semester. I went on no pay leave to avoid having to teach 3 courses per semester so I could focus on this. And so we made a lot of progress compared to other innovations on our campuses because of that. And I think it was a brave step, and I had the opportunity to do it, and I did it.
But what was the process of getting the university to give up the IP and to hand it over to you? Like, did you have to give them equity? Did you have to pay them? Did you say you'd have to limit the uses to certain things that they agreed to? Or did they just say, hey, look, go and do this. We're super proud of you. Good luck.
It was some of all, a little bit of everything, but mainly, so basically, there's royalties. So once we start to sell biogas, the university I think gets 2.5% of net revenues for the first 20 years of selling the biogas. So that's like massive for my university. We are not.
Would you have given them five? Would you have given them 10? Would you have given them 50? Just anything to prove that this can be done? Or did you have kind of like you worked out the numbers, like this is not going to work unless, and like there was like a hard negotiation discussion going on?
We had to negotiate the number, and it had to be based on people like Brian Copeland and other people who understood the numbers and the question of how much equity makes sense, how much royalties make sense, because you could actually overpromise and kill your business before it even starts. And so in this process, I've read many stories. I've learned a lot from people telling stories. I'm an MIT alumna, and so I could actually sign up in the MIT alumni portal to meet with CEOs and founders from the MIT network. And I did that. I met with probably 12 founders in the MIT alumni network who are different stages of starting up and running corporations and whatever. And so we learn from many stories what number to give to the university. And every number we've given, because we have technical advisors who are being paid with equity and things like that. And so all of that is based on reading and understanding other success stories.
And besides that conversation, did you? I mean, I find it fascinating that you tapped into the MIT network to talk to these founders. Were there other topics? I mean, you're an academic, you've been studying for most of your life, you weren't an entrepreneur. Um, did you have wider conversations about like the path that you were about to get on? And like, did you sit there and think like, do I really want to take the time off and do this? Like, did you have that conversation with yourself and with others?
So we're co-founders, my husband and I. He's one of my founders, and we have a strong network between us of supportive advisors. And even when we chose who our technical advisors would be, that I mean, every step of the way for us, we didn't treat like no, we didn't treat any step lightly. We went to our network and we discussed things in many voices. There's wisdom.
It's fascinating that you'd be a co-founder with your husband. Was he a previous entrepreneur? What was his
Yeah, he
background?
was. He's like, yeah. So my husband is a data scientist. His first boss was Barack Obama, the Obama '08 campaign. He's like, so he's my same age. He's 45, and I mean, there were two. He worked for Microsoft for 2 years as a senior data scientist, and he worked with all of these Gen Z people who are like, "Whoa, Nigel," because Nigel remembers computers before there was Windows. so so he's like that kind of I guess computer nerd, and he not only because he studied cognitive science for his first degree at Yale, and then he did international affairs at George Washington University, and the whole time then he did international affairs, looking at how do you model societal and political systems using early artificial intelligence. And so that's he's very passionate about politics, but also about cognitive science and artificial intelligence, machine learning. But we both independently, even before we were married, we both knew our North Star was to go back to our region to keep building there. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, we both ended up back home, and this was like absolutely the passion of both our hearts to build something that could make global impact with a Caribbean identity to it. And so, yeah, I mean, it's a passion project for both of us. It's cost us a lot. Our kids pay for it more than anybody else, but we love this work, and we're continuing to go far.
Okay, I want to ask a kind of an uncomfortable question because it's a unique situation, but you are two individuals with 5 degrees from good schools who are working on an organization that's raised 700,000 in 4.5 years, 5 years. What's the expectation? What are you hoping as a couple when you talk about this organization? Where do you see this going? And do you view this as a couple like, okay, one of us is going to have to get a job eventually. We're going to hand it off to the other one, or is this something like, no, this is our North Star has always been to come back and to do some good, and this is part of that process, and you don't have that conversation so much.
We have a conversation every day. So Nigel, actually, so I was lucky in 2024 that I got Nigel to work with me full time for 9 months. For most of this journey, he's worked separate and kind of stuck his head in the door and helped with different decisions, but worked to feed us. So that's one thing. But the thing is, he's a data scientist. So data scientists are pretty well paid now. The world is changing every day, but for now, a data scientist could cover two salaries for a family. So we've had that unique and helpful, which is why I said I was able to stop working at my university and focus on the startup. That's why I was able to, because I have a supportive spouse. But we actually we I guess strategized to get a period of him really coming on full time. And so 2023 was our year for that, where we both worked full time to pull off Test Drive Zero. And then once Test Drive Zero pulled off, he went back into work. So now he works for a NGO, and is back into his political numbers, but he does help.
Okay, so he came in for a little bit full time. Now he's going back out, but he's still like a strategic advisor, and of course, you can always pull him in for a couple of meetings if needed. Okay, so all right, so then I want to kind of wrap up a little bit. Like, what have you learned about entrepreneurship and being an entrepreneur through this time?
About you have to have laser focus on the value, the core of why we're doing it, because the
Mm,
you actually have to be able to pivot as a CEO of a company. You might realize some technology might shift or whatever might happen, and so
yeah,
focus might have to shift. So our bridge, for example, the CNG bridge is a pivot. So it's we have to keep focus on what is the value system we're going after, what is our north star, and you have to keep your eyes fixed on that, because there's so many dynamics from month to month, from year to year, that we have to manage and
yeah,
navigate. And so to stay stable in the center of that, I think I have a 5 year old, a 14-year old, and a 15-year old. And I know even the dynamics of my personal life do play a role in how I lead my company.
yeah,
And that really does center me. Being a mother, being a wife, reminds me, fix your eyes on the value system. What are the kids seeing? What are they learning? When they hear our meetings, they might come and say, "Hey, I didn't like that investor." I'm like,
mm,
so the thing is, do I walk the talk, and do they see all the different streams of life and see that they converge at one value system? And so
yeah,
I would say the value system, if everything is lost and we end up saying, okay, well, we tried and we did good effort and now next, if that ever happens, nothing would have been lost, because as a
right,
family we built a value system and we believed it and we lived it in the entire process. So I
cool,
always say, it's very dynamic. You're not sure which path will work. You're not sure where the next investment will come from sometimes, but the belief is that we have no regrets in the process that we engaged for this period of time. And so that's what
love it,
keeps me stable in all of it.
love it. Okay, um, 5 years from now, what does success look like to you? And what are you doing now to set up that foundation?
For me, milestones are great. So test drive zero is a great milestone. Getting to
Hmm.
85% readiness in my pilot, great milestone. And I love that. I'm an engineer.
Yep.
I'm a doer.
Yeah.
But at the heart of it, do I represent in all my decisions the value system that I profess? Like, do I walk the talk? And
Yeah.
so if I have 5 years of walking the talk for the next 5 years and we're still broke, it'll still be success in my mind. But I mean, what would be great, like a great dream, is 5 years from now, we do have a few hundred customers in Barbados, and we are halfway through the first megawatt of biogas production. That'll be beautiful.
Okay. Okay.
But more importantly, and what keeps me sane in all of this, is I need to have people around me who disagree with me, and
Yeah.
constantly questioning, okay, what is the thing behind that thing? And so as long as that stays stable for 5 years, then I'm okay. I'm good.